Welcome to Afterthoughts, everybody, the podcast where we break down a movie or TV show or whatever the hell we feel like every week. And I'm Michael Dixon, your host this week. With me, as always, is Mr. Ryan King.
Hey, the world ain't all rainbows and sunshine.
It's not? Really?
It's not. No, it's a hard, nasty place. What is it?
Oh, fuck. Wow, okay.
And we're gonna talk about
this is getting
it.
dark very quickly. John Garcia, you have anything to rebuttal Ryan's comment there?
I'm vegan, but should I drink raw eggs? Is that like a good idea? I still haven't figured out if that helps with anything.
Does
It
that
seems
count?
like some
Yeah.
kind of miracle cure that makes you
think
ready
so.
for the champ.
Yeah. It starts the montage. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
If you picked up from those comments, we are talking about Rocky.
Rocky, do you believe that America is the land of opportunity?
Yeah.
I'll break both your arms so they don't work for you.
He's every man who ever settled for something less.
What about my pride, Nick? At least you have pride. I ain't had no pride. I ain't had nothing.
He's the man who never had a chance until now. Rocky. His whole life was a 1,000,000-to-1 shot. His name is Sylvester Stallone, but you will always remember him as Rocky.
Rocky tells the story of a kindly mob enforcer who lucks into the opportunity of a lifetime, the chance to punch a cocky caricature of Muhammad Ali who shares absolutely none of Ali's revolutionary political views. Rocky may or may not win the fight, but damn does he win our hearts. So yeah, Rocky, everybody's seen Rocky. We all know the story of Rocky. I think it's interesting thinking back on it. I thought it might be fun to talk about this movie because Creed 3 has come out recently, and I was thinking back on the franchise, and I think people think about Rocky more for the sequels and the like horrible spawn of sports movies that it created more than the original movie and what that actually is. And it really doesn't feel like a sports movie. There was a huge turn after Rocky came out in 1976 where just all these sports movies started to come out and they all have the same heroic triumph, the exact same plot where the underdog comes through and wins the day in these unlikely scenarios. And Rocky like kind of is that, but also kind of isn't. Like it really feels more like a gritty 70s character drama than it does a sports movie. It's like a working class story about a guy who just kind of has no confidence in himself. And everybody in the movie is worried about being called a bum. Like that's the worst thing you could be is a bum.
A bum is like a mook, apparently.
Yeah. And, it's like he has no self-worth because the world around him and, 70s America, there's a lot of poverty and, he lives in a poor neighborhood in Philadelphia and he just feels like he can't make something of himself and accomplish what he wants to. And it's this intimate character piece kind of following him throughout his life with him, his friends, the girl he's interested in, and then, kind of turns into this triumphant sports story at the end. But even then, doesn't do what every sports movie does, right? Like Rocky, spoiler alert, loses at the end, and it doesn't even really matter, right? It's not about beating the bad guy. It's about him like gaining self-respect and realizing that, hey, like he actually isn't a piece of shit. He's not a bum. He can actually accomplish things in his life. And there's a lot of inspiration in that, but it's not the same kind of cheesiness of most sports movies. There's some cheesy stuff in Rocky, but like there's a training montage, and as far as I can tell, it's the first ever training montage. But like if the montage is fucking awesome, like the music in Rocky is great from start to finish, and it's just a really good time. There's not a lot of boxing in it, actually. There's 3 fights, but there's only 2 fights, I guess. There's really not much time spent in the ring. It really is more of this gritty streets character drama, just following these people throughout their daily lives and examining their flaws and just kind of giving them respect as human beings for what they are, even like a tragic piece of shit like Paulie, just, kind of recognizing his humanity and giving him a place on the screen next to everyone else. So I always really enjoy this movie. Whenever I revisit it, I have a really good time with it. And I think it's, you look at the franchise after that and it kind of became a caricature of itself. and just kind of repeating the same story, but having Rocky win every time. And like every new movie, they find a reason to make Rocky be a huge underdog, even though he's like the heavyweight champion of the world. And he like never loses fights, but all of a sudden it's like, oh, this guy, there's no way you could beat Mr. T. What? Yo, there's no way you could beat Ivan Drago. Are you kidding me? They kind of find reasons to retell that same story over and over, which gets a bit dull. And you think of it as a cheesy, like, oh, this is like a fucking Rudy or something. It's like, it's not. It's actually a pretty good movie, I think. So yeah, I'm interested to hear both of your thoughts on Rocky, but I think it's a movie that we think back on kind of incorrectly because of the cultural zeitgeist of it and everything that came after it. But that original Rocky movie is pretty fucking great, I think.
Yeah.
He loses to Mr. T, right? In Rocky
He
3.
does, but then he beats him at the end.
Then
The
he
fight in
gets
the
him
middle
back.
of the movie doesn't matter. It's just the fight at the end of the movie that matters.
Yeah, I watched Rocky with my family. We were looking for things, I don't know, a few months back, looking for things to watch as a whole family. And Darla had said, like, hey, Rocky's a classic. He gets referenced all the time. I'm trying to think through things that kids need for cultural touchstones. And Rocky is absolutely one of those.
Yeah.
That comes up all the time. So watched it as a whole family. I was interested to see how the kids could easily just like attach to the concept that, and you're right, this is like the first sports training montage and kind of sets the tone for sports movies. There's several that kind of came out around this same era, but this sets the one for the underdog from the streets kind of thing. I think the Bad News Bears was like the exact same year, and it's kind of a similar like underdog, like they're all disrespected, unexpected to be any good kind of thing, and then those two probably shot this up, right? So kids were able to attach to that really well. I was surprised looking back at how absolutely little boxing there is and how absolutely horrible the boxing is in it. I think that, especially when we talk about Creed, so many movies have better been able to put the sports in their film and actually make it look okay and direct it in a way that an audience can understand without knowing how the sports work.
Mm-hmm.
This one, I even wonder, like, did the people making the movie know how boxing worked?
I don't. Stallone did the choreography himself. So
yeah. It's surprising now. I think when people hear that Sylvester Stallone wrote this, and how it is a really good script that isn't just about this boxer. It's actually surprisingly a lot about a woman in horrible relationships. I would even say with Rocky.
Yeah, he's a really good writer
himself.
Yeah, but yeah, no, like that's you get the feeling for him. I love how early on everyone sees him, just loves him, like that he just has this connection with all these people around him, and then to see the cockiness of our other boxer and how that plays off each other and that kind of that expectation. It is interesting and maybe worth a slight talk of the fact that we have a white boxer versus a black boxer, which, and I have to think that Sylvester Stallone and the makers probably were like, it's the 70s, we're past all of that. And
post-racial.
Yeah.
And in a way, I will say, we're presented as Rocky being the down and under, he doesn't have money, right? So it isn't really necessarily presented a way that's that way, but it is still like stands out a little bit in my mind still of the potential there for some misunderstandings.
Well, they make a note of it too in the middle of the movie.
Apollo, it is a coincidence that you're fighting a white man on the most celebrated day in the country's history.
I don't know about that. Is it a coincidence that he's fighting a black man on the most celebrated day in the country's history?
Which is good to point out, but I do feel like this is even back then a what we call dorm room poster movie.
Mm-hmm.
For like young up and coming white men and particularly like Italian American white men, and to be careful of that, and especially if you look at it, the later Rocky movies play so hard into stereotypes that the fight becomes about something. That if you look back at this one and you're like, no, this was just part of the overall story that's being told and all that. But anyway, I feel like it still holds up. There's some parts that are questionable. Just I feel like after a certain time period, you go back and look and everything's a little bit questionable. We can talk about that. John.
Yeah. So this it's not my first time seeing Rocky. I think it's my second time seeing Rocky. I think the last time I watched it was like pre-college, so I haven't seen it since then. Rocky 4 has destroyed my brain. And I was so convinced that the montage here had children running alongside Rocky Balboa up the steps. And then I realized that's another Rocky movie.
That's Rocky 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, misremembering all of these other dynamics because of the caricatures of the other Rocky movies.
They couldn't afford extras in this one.
Yeah. It actually,
Yeah,
I
no.
feel like that kind of worked to its benefit. And
Oh,
some
yeah.
of the sequences felt so isolated and alone. This really felt like the antithesis to me of Taxi Driver. It's like you have
Mhm.
two loners. One of them becomes like an underdog Cinderella story, and the other becomes a political maniac who's like,
You could argue that they both become underdog Cinderella stories.
Yeah, I suppose you're correct. But yeah, like I couldn't help but think about that the entire time I watched this. Was just like, wow, like there's having just watched Taxi Driver pretty recently too. I couldn't pull away from thinking about, man, Rocky was dealt a similar hand to Travis Bickle. He's not a veteran as far as we know.
Yeah, but he's been hit in the face a lot.
But he's been hit in the face a
Yeah.
lot, and that counts for something. I absolutely love this story. I love the characters in it. There are things, that are questionable about how it comes together, but they're less questionable than other things that I've seen recently with regard to like the sexual overtones to it. I just watched an old 50s movie called Pillow Talk, or 60s movie. And that
Was it porn?
It was not porn. It had Rock Hudson and Doris Day. If it was porn, that would be some landmark Hollywood history.
Yeah, right. That'd be
It is kind of crazy that Rock Hudson is not a porn star.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
Like that name. It's like, wait, that's a real guy. Oh, okay.
But that one had like such casual allusions to rape and or being gay, and I was just like, and then I watched Rocky immediately after and was like, I culturally don't see anything wrong with Rocky now because the bar has been set to this other degree. But yeah, there are moments where you're like, that's a little off. Overall though, inspiring, like just great to get to know the characters. I feel like even if you were somebody who is really cynical about Rocky as a character, the fact that he talks so much about himself and how dumb he is, and he says the same things like over and over again, but in different ways, it still becomes this believable thing. Like it's been literally and metaphorically beaten into him that he's a bum and he's going to be nobody and he needs to just live this life. And the movie does such a good job laying groundwork for you to cheer and root for him in that latter half. Even with the boxing being the equivalent of what technology is today in movies. Where like nobody understands when they're writing about it. I enjoyed this. The score as well seems a little bit more underplayed. Like I remember the score from the other Rocky movies where they really blast the trumpets and they like go extra hard into the revelry of it.
They do that in this one
They
too.
do it in this one, but they build their way to it, and they have these
Yeah.
subtle kind of sweet moments that reminded me of other sort of movies of the time where it's just very dramatically done and not for the purpose of, here's this evil Russian and now here's the good guy from America. And like there aren't that drastic of tones between the score to give you that accentuation. It doesn't feel like I'm trying to be exploited until like the montage starts, and then I'm like, okay, I'm into it. I'm totally here for it. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I didn't realize that Stallone didn't direct it. I knew he wrote it, thought he directed it, but apparently not.
Yeah, he directed all the sequels, but not the first one. He didn't have enough clout in Hollywood at the time.
Still, I thought it was, so well written and just one of my, now I want to go back and watch it again. I actually did watch it twice. So I might as well make it a third time and then just skip right over to Rocky 3, which Dixon was hyping up.
I watched Rocky 2 and Rocky 3 this week, and Rocky 2, I was like, this is just kind of dumb. Like they're doing the exact same movie, but worse. And then Rocky 3, I was like, I it's not great until the last like 30 minutes. And then I'm just like, hell yes. Like everything just hits the right beats, and it's just like you in the movie, like, fuck yeah, go Rocky. And it's it's not as good a movie as Rocky, but it's an entertaining watch for sure. And Mr. T is fucking awesome in it.
Yeah, the only other
Yeah.
thing I wanted to add is the entire time Dixon talked about Rocky becoming a caricature series of escalating stakes, I could only stare at Ryan and think that they had made a shonen manga for him that was like the Dragon Ball Z of boxing. And that's kind of what Rocky seems to have become, is Rocky's the greatest boxer ever. Oh no, better boxer now. And what could possibly happen? So seeing Creed was such like the movies, of course, the Creed movies is such a refreshing thing, having come off of like those caricatures and seeing like Rocky Balboa get back to being kind of a more grounded character, even if it is in the
Yeah.
same formula. I just like this version of Rocky. I don't like the other ones that come after.
This
So,
is definitely the best version of Rocky. And like, I feel like the later movies lose a little bit of that character richness as they play into the tropes that they have created, and they just kind of keep trying to hit those beats and do the things that you expect them to do. But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to talk about Stallone and how this came about. Like, he was homeless for a while, and while he was trying to, like, he moved to Hollywood and he was trying to get a job. He wanted to be an actor, and nobody would hire him. He has like some paralysis in his face from like some sort of birth accident that, that's why I kind of like, people make fun of when he like yells, his mouth is kind of crooked. Like, that's because of a paralysis issue that he has, and he was having trouble getting cast for things. And he wrote this script over 3 days, and people loved it. And he got an offer to purchase it for $350,000, and he said, "No, you have to make me the leading man in this. I want to play Rocky." And the studio was like, "No, we're not doing that." And so finally, he got somebody to make it, but they said, "You're going to give us a script for free, and we're going to pay you 35 grand as the lead role, and that's it." And he just like gambled on himself and went for it, which is like just fucking wild that like because of that, like we now live in a world where Stallone has all these horrible cheesy action movies, and this entire thing has come out of that. We have fucking Expendables movies and all of this because he took that gamble on himself. And like the story of Rocky is very much in parallel with the story of Stallone himself.
yeah, he made something serious that was art at first, and then he became a caricature as he went on. In his
And he
other
like
roles.
went from poverty to the big time.
There
and,
you go. He bought Polly a robot. Polly fucks that robot. We all know this.
Except Rocky won Best Picture, and Rocky didn't beat Carl Weathers.
Oh
so.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's true. Well, where do you want to jump in first, Dixon? Do you think?
Yeah, so I guess just kind of talking about the characters in this. I totally forgot that Rocky was a mob enforcer, and like the script somehow believably makes you think that this is a nice guy, despite the fact that he makes money in theory breaking legs for the mob to collect on their debts. But they're like, oh, he's nice. His boss tells him to break people's fingers, but he doesn't do it, because he's a good guy at heart, and kind of trying to walk this line between somebody who in any other movie would be the bad guy and the criminal is like, oh, he just took this job because that's kind of the hand that life has dealt him. And, then he is once he's able to pull out of that, he does, and he leaves that behind. But I always forget when I come back to watch this movie that his day job is breaking fingers for the mob.
Well, having just watched like On the Waterfront pretty recently,
Yeah.
do you see a lot of influence in that here? Like, do you think Stallone really dug Brando's approach and wanted to make something that was a little bit similar?
It feels very similar to On the Waterfront for sure. I could see him drawing some inspiration there, definitely. There's even like some scenes on the docks where he is like, and he's breaking people's fingers or not breaking them on the docks to get people to pay their loans.
Yeah.
It's interesting how they do try to present him as that, that he has that heart of gold, because he doesn't want to have to do the enforcing part. You're right. He's kind of like, this is the job I could get.
Mhm.
But we see several scenes where he tries to tell people, like, don't get into this. Like, don't get into this life. Don't do these things. Don't
Yeah.
take these loans. Like, don't be like me, essentially. That is interesting to present it that way.
Yeah, and I feel like that also he's constantly trying to make something of himself, not even just in the boxing sense, just meeting his character. He like just will espouse these platitudes to other people, trying to tell them to be better. And the whole time it seems that those people don't give a shit about him. Like it pushes him away from them, and there's such isolation the entire time you meet, or like the opening sequences when you're meeting him and he's talking to other folks. He's not making eye contact with some people. He's just trying to like be in their presence. He tries to walk that little girl home and tell her that she needs to be better and that people will think that she's a whore if she uses terrible language. And it's like Rocky's.
You talk dirty, you might end up becoming a whore.
They'll remember you before you be the whore. Like, it's just.
Guys don't take those girls serious.
I gotta use a bad word. Whore. You understand? Whore. See, you use dirty words and maybe you end up becoming a whore. You understand?
He's trying to speak from experience, but he doesn't really know how to connect beyond that. And you can see it in the way he's trying to tell jokes to Adrian, where I think Paulie's probably the closest person he really connects with. And that's because they can both be really honest with each other and like just really brash as well. Paulie's just a brash character in general. But yeah, those moments, they serve such an interesting point to frame him as that character, to let you know he has that heart of gold underneath him. He's trying to better his community the only way he knows how. It's just he's never really had anybody to tell him how to better his community, so it's just the best he can do.
Yeah, and he's a guy who's just like trying to figure life out on his own, right? Like he doesn't really seem to have any family in the picture aside from like photos on his mirror in his shitty apartment, and he's just kind of trying to do what he can with his life, and he wishes he could be a better boxer, but like the trainers won't give him the time of day because they don't see any value in spending time with him, and they think he's like, Mick thinks he's wasting his life working as a mob enforcer, but also Mick won't give him the help that he needs. So there's like, what's he going to do? And Stallone almost has this, it's a weird combination of pride and shame where he seems, kind of ashamed that he hasn't made more of his life, but also he seems to not think that's possible. And like within his environment, he seems to not really be ashamed of much. Like, he has Adrian over to his apartment and like the couch there's holes all over it.
Got
there's
beers everywhere.
Yeah, empty beer cans, and like there's newspaper on the couch covering up the holes. And like he doesn't seem to really be ashamed of that. There's kind of like a pride that he has in his working class life. And like he knows he's doing what he can to get by, and he doesn't really see anything wrong with that. And I think that's an interesting dichotomy between those two aspects.
I also think it's an interesting contrast between that and Taxi Driver. You have the exact same kind of slummy sort of apartment setup, but Stallone seems to be more so oblivious to, or not even oblivious, but just unbothered by the way that he lives his life when he's trying to like pat the couch to get Adrian to come over. And there's just all those beer bottles shoved into the cushions behind the couch. And then he's got a knife driven into the wall where he hangs a hat on it. Like that apartment is so threatening the way it's laid out. But like if you look at Travis Bickle, his apartment it's not meticulously organized, but it is
he doesn't have
cleaner
a lot of
and
shit.
neater, and he doesn't have a lot of shit. And he just has these rules that he lives by and takes care of. And for Rocky even says this is only temporary. He's telling Adrian, I'm not going to be here for long. And I don't know if that means he's going to have to move to another apartment or if he really does see himself getting a better life at some point soon. Like he's holding out hope with what he has.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like at some point we have to talk about Rocky and Adrian's relationship. And we've been referencing, there's some sketchy stuff in here. Like we should just rip off the Band-Aid and talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
I have very mixed feelings about that like whole courtship sequence. Like Rocky is talking to Paulie. He's like, hey, why don't your sister give me a time of day? And he's like, yeah, come over tomorrow for Thanksgiving and like we'll hang out. And like, they're walking over there the next day and Rocky's like, hey, your sister know I'm coming over? He's like, yeah, she's very excited. They get there and clearly Adrian has no idea that Rocky was getting there and is like freaked out of her mind and like not prepared for that kind of thing, like not mentally or emotionally ready for some dude to just walk in and try to take her out on a date. And that scene is very upsetting. She's clearly does not want to go, and Paulie keeps pushing it. And then finally she like, assents and goes. And then the ice rink scene, I think is amazing. Like I love that sequence. Rocky bribing the guy running the rink to let them on. There's nobody there. Adrian is skating while Rocky's running beside her is so funny to me. And that sequence is really charming, I think, as Rocky is really trying to identify with her and get her to like him. But the only thing he knows how to talk about is boxing.
See, I tell you what the trouble is. You see, I'm a southpaw.
What's a southpaw?
Oh, southpaw means you're left-handed, and southpaw throws your timing off. You see, other guys throws their timing off, makes them look awkward. Nobody wants to look awkward. You know where southpaw came from?
9 minutes.
I'll tell you. A long time ago, there was this guy, maybe a couple hundred years ago. He was fighting he was fighting around. I think it was around Philadelphia, and his arm. He was left-handed. His arm was facing towards New Jersey. You see, and that's south. So then naturally they call him southpaw. You see, southpaw, South Jersey, South Camden. Southpaw. You know what I mean?
Yeah, showing her photos. I love that everybody in this movie that's into boxing carries photos around from their old days. Even Mickey produces like some old photo
from
of
like 50 years ago when he beat up somebody.
It's the pedigree. It's like all that you have as a boxer, which is tragic in a way. It's kind of funny to think about. Like I wouldn't carry those kinds of things. But it's so much of their life is spent in the ring that's all they know how to do and how they know how to produce. Is that pedigree of here's what I used to look like. Here's what I did. And Rocky talking about, you see my nose? It's been like tugged on, chewed on, everything. It just hadn't been broken yet.
Nose.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of that.
But yeah.
But that scene is so good at the ice rink. And then you cut from there to the apartment. And it's like, Rocky just keeps begging her to come into the apartment. And that scene is like kind of cute. He's like, hey, come on. He's like leaving the door open and going back inside, kind of poking his head out. But then once she gets in there, it's like pretty rapey.
Yeah.
She's clearly not comfortable being there. She tries to leave and he's like pushes his hand over the door so she can't escape. And he's like, oh, I'm going to kiss you. You don't got to kiss me back, but I want to kiss you. Like, oh, fuck.
That line.
But of course she's into it. And, then they just like become boyfriend and girlfriend magically.
You could have cut those that like, I'm going to kiss you. You don't have to kiss me back sort of stuff. The one line that Adrian says in that scene that really resonates with me is when he says, "You really pretty." And she's like, "You stop teasing me."
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is so sweet. It warms my heart that Rocky's being genuine with her. And she's just been so abused verbally by Paulie probably and plenty other people,
mom.
definitely by Paulie, by her mom.
Yeah.
That there's somebody here who like genuinely sees her as beautiful and values her, but doesn't know how to connect so well with her.
Yeah.
And then it's all undercut when he's like, "I'm gonna kiss you, don't have to kiss back." And it's just like, why would you do that? It doesn't.
Yeah. It's definitely presented that he almost seems to immediately be enamored with her, maybe already in love with her, like from the instant he sees her. Contrary to all the animals he's stealing, like finally he sees somebody other than an animal to just take home.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's in the movie, it's this him trying to bring down her walls, and you can see it, and you can see like what he's trying to do, but it is in that way in the 70s where it's like, well, you just gotta, you gotta win them over. That girls don't say what they really want. They're gonna say no until you get them to say yes. Kind of like. That
Some
today's
people say shyness
really creepy.
is a disease. I don't
Yeah, yeah. Today comes off as really creepy, and there's like a couple tweaks there that would make it get that across. Because you're right, like the ice rink stuff is really great.
Mhm.
The things they say, it's clear like that he isn't just trying to use her or anything like that. But you're right, like the early parts, like definitely even still a cultural problem of just like, hey, I have this guy, he's coming over. Like, you need to be in a relationship. Paulie really is trying to like get her out, right? This expectation that's like, you're old enough, you be out of here. And it's like, just, I'm going to keep bringing guys and you have to go on dates with them. And you,
yeah, geez.
That's rough.
Yeah, you have to placate them. You have to, do whatever. Like, I try to imagine the flip in any of these scenarios. Like, you would never see it where they're telling a guy like, hey, you need, maybe you would be like, hey, you need a girl, but then never is it like, hey, I brought a girl for you. And it's like, well, I'm not into her. Well, you gotta go. You get like, right. Shoving on them the same way. And then, yeah, similarly, like it wouldn't make sense if you saw it in a movie where the girl is like pushing the guy like this and pinning it up against the wall almost, or right. That it's like, okay, well, then if it isn't, then it's wrong. Right. It would just be very different.
Yeah.
We did have to pause the movie and kind of like talk a little bit and be like,
oh yeah,
this is an older movie, like talk to our kids. And it's like, if anyone ever does this to you, it's not okay. In this movie, it's presented this way, but like that's a no. Like, even if they do really like you, like, no, that's not how this shit happened. Like, we had to stop and have a discussion.
That's
So yeah,
probably
it
for the
is. It's
best.
interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I love seeing the kind of before and after for Adrian's story as a whole for this movie. I love her arc as
Yes,
a character.
she has an incredible character arc.
Having her start out, just that sweet moment, the first moment that you know that Rocky is 100% genuine towards her. Just he has the best intentions. He goes about it the wrong ways, but him practicing in front of the mirror, the joke he's going to tell her the next day when he goes to the pet store
Yeah, that's pretty
about the
good.
moths and the turtles getting shell shock. It's super cute. And Adrian, it doesn't blow him off. Like her body language very much is that of somebody who just doesn't want to be disturbed any more than she already has been. And watching their relationship sort of blossom after that rapey sequence in his apartment, when they actually become like a cute couple, and a lot is happening where she's trying to support him and also understand fighting. She's still trying to understand why he wants to fight. It's so beautiful. And then when she blows up on Paulie, whenever Paulie gets frustrated with her and is just trying to unload his problems on her.
You're a loser! I don't get married because of you! You can't live by yourself! I put you two together and you... Don't you forget it! You owe me! You owe me! What do I owe you? You're supposed to be good to me! What do I owe you, Paulie? What do I owe you? I treat you good! I cook for you, I clean for you, I pick up your dirty clothes! I take care of you, Paulie! I don't owe you nothing! And you made me feel like a loser! I'm not a loser!
That scene made me cry because I was just like, I think the only other time I've seen somebody that's like family destroy somebody and it makes me tear up is in It's a Wonderful Life. Just that sequence of being so frustrated with somebody and being like, the fuck is wrong with you? Like, why don't you understand that you're hurting me? Or, you know, this kind of empathetic reach that Adrian has to bring Paulie back to ground after he's flung off the handle. It was just so overwhelming.
Yeah, it's like Rocky has given her self-confidence finally, you know, that she actually knows that she deserves to be loved and that somebody out there actually cares about her and doesn't view her as a burden, and like, you know, finally gives her the confidence to step up to Paulie and tell him to stop being a piece of shit. I think talking about Paulie, like he is such a tragic character, and you know, kind of like the inverse of like what could have happened to Rocky if he was, you know, 10, 15 years older and didn't achieve success and was stuck in a shitty working class job with nowhere to go and feels like his life has passed him by. And, you know, Paulie is constantly blaming everyone else for all of his problems. He always thinks people owe him something. You know, he's like constantly asking Rocky for a job. He's, you know, he just can't fathom the fact that maybe like, yes, there are obviously societal circumstances around why he is in poverty, right? Or is in a working class situation, given where we were economically in the 70s and what was going on at the time. But like also, you know, to some degree, there's a personal responsibility there, and he's just refusing to take that. And he's always mad at the world and at everyone around him, even his closest friends, his sister, because he thinks he's deserving of more than he has. And, you know, he's drinking on the job at the meatpacking plant, and, you know, just clearly has anger issues and alcohol issues. And it's just so sad to see. It feels like the life that Rocky could have if he doesn't have a positive outlook and doesn't catch the success that he ends up catching.
Well, speaking of Paulie, these kind of characters all hit different. Well, just speaking of the characters in general and how strongly they believe their different core values, like Paulie being a reflection of what Rocky could be like if he was more cynical and just let himself, you know, give up, or having Adrian reflect into Rocky's optimism, suddenly realize that she has self-confidence. Let's talk about Creed. Let's talk about Creed's character.
Yes.
As just being kind of this overly confident. There's really not a whole lot to Apollo Creed. He is just he's the champ. That's all that they really advertise him as. I think like one of the lines that made me laugh that he said was like, I think after this, I'm going to run for emperor.
Yeah.
And it's just like that brazen confidence is like all that he's meant to have. Even his ringside manager, has a bit more of an intensity in the character development. Like his
Right.
ringside manager's trying to watch out for him. There's a sense of care there. There's sort of a little bit more cautiousness in watching Rocky's rise. But Creed, I never got a good sense of who Creed is beyond he's just a dude who peacocks all the time. He's a peacock. You got to let him fly.
Yeah, and you don't really get any character depth from Creed until Rocky 3, and they give him more screen time, and he gets a little bit more. You get a little bit more from him, but he still has that very outward, cocky nature to him. But he becomes a little bit more human in that movie. But yeah, it really feels like Stallone just wrote this. Like Stallone said he was inspired by seeing somebody knock down Muhammad Ali, and it feels like he's just writing an Ali caricature as Apollo Creed. And just with none of like Muhammad Ali is such an amazing cultural figure. He was stood for all these amazing things. He was anti-war. He refused to go to Vietnam. He was a big part of the civil rights movement. And meanwhile, Apollo Creed is like dressing up as George Washington and wearing the American flag, and just nothing at all like of what Muhammad Ali stood for. It feels like a missed opportunity a little bit to not give him a little bit more depth and maybe write some of those aspects into that character and make him a little more interesting. It's not what the movie's trying to do. He's just kind of like the imposing big bad, and the movie it really does so well dive into the characters of Rocky, Paulie, and Adrian, and Mick to some degree as well. But with Creed, yeah, he's just kind of this cartoon, and Carl Weathers is so good in the role.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
But I do wish he had a little bit more to do for sure.
Yeah, he's just a force to be overcome. Like there isn't
Mhm.
really much to that. It is interesting though. So the whole plot stems on the fact that Creed isn't going to have the fight he was supposed to, and so it is interesting now because I don't think people would tune in for this fight, right? Like if it was just like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, it's like all right, our major boxer here doesn't have the person they're supposed to fight, so here's some guy from the local town. Hey everybody, this is going to be a big deal. But so many of the seats to an event back then were selling to the local crowd, selling to the paper, selling to the news channel, getting people to show up, versus now where they're much more like international big events where people fly out to for a fight that would be this big. And so yeah, the fact that like it wouldn't work today. You couldn't actually do this exact same plot today because it would make no
Yeah.
sense. No one would give a crap. But
Well,
then the
we
way that
honestly
like
don't even know if anyone cared about this fight because they basically darkened the entire arena because
True,
they couldn't
yeah, they
afford
couldn't get enough
extras.
people.
Yeah.
And they only had like 50 extras in the whole place, and they just like lined them up around Rocky and Creed when they're entering, and then they moved them around the ring, and like there's
make
basically
it- yeah.
nobody in there. But
Yeah.
Yeah. But the Creed buying into and selling that, like, and the fact that you do see the bit where he kind of gets excited of like, okay, yeah, like he mishears his manager essentially and is like, no, that's great. Like, and then people are gonna eat that up. Like, that's
Mhm.
great. We'll look even better then because people will show up instead of the like, hey, you might lose. Like, he never ever possibly thinks
no,
that this is gonna be a fight that matters. It's just like, did we sell enough seats? Great. I don't care. Let me get out there, kick his ass.
yeah,
Everybody will love me, and I'll go to the next thing.
just find somebody with a cool name to put on a poster. The Italian Stallion.
Yeah. Is there anything to be said for sort of sports exploitation in this movie? Do you feel like there's any sort of because
How do you mean?
you have like the commissioner or is it the commissioner the
promoter, yeah.
the promoter who's like, oh, it's great, we just get some local yokel and have them fight the champ, that's perfectly fine. And he sort of he tells Mickey that he's looking for a sparring partner, and that's how it lures sparring partner for Creed, and that lures Rocky in. And when Rocky's like, I would spar with him, I wouldn't take any cheap shots or anything, the promoter's just like, no, like I want you to box him. He's fully aware that there's kind of like this dance around saying like this is going to be a real fight or not. Is it an exhibition or not? Because later Creed's manager says he thinks that this is a real fight. He doesn't think that this is like an
yeah.
exhibition
A
match.
show. Yeah.
Yeah. And even when Rocky is wandering around the empty stadium contemplating what's going to happen, he's like, they got my pants wrong. Like I have, white ones with red stripes. And the promoter's like, doesn't really matter, does it?
Mr. Jurgens, the poster's wrong.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm wearing white pants with a red stripe.
It doesn't really matter, does it? Sure you're going to give us a great show.
Like he's just kind of a skeezy dude who wants to get people in seats and sell that. He doesn't really give a shit about Rocky. And it's sort of in theme with everything else where Rocky talks about nobody cared about me before. Why should I care about them now? But it made me think, made me kind of curious if there was anything to it or if it was just sort of like, no, that's just a caricature that Stallone needed to help push this along.
I think it's probably more the latter. I mean, like boxing promoters are notorious shitheads.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, boxing is strange. So I actually think that particularly this sport gives in well to having the underdog story that wouldn't necessarily work in other sports because instantly comes to my mind is Mayweather. The criticism against him all the time was he wouldn't take the fights he should take to actually show he was the best. He just wanted to pad out his number eventually. Like he didn't want to get that loss. He wanted to see how many he could get to. And even the like Pacquiao fight was people know Pacquiao, people know Mayweather. They're nowhere near the same size and shouldn't be fighting by any stretch of the imagination. And it ended up being a good fight
for like being so defensive and not
slow,
actually
boring.
He just wanted to win it on points by just touching the other person enough times, you know, and like he was super fast and he'd get away with that. But like you're not seeing him trying to knock anybody out.
Yeah, and the fact that you can go so long between a match and then pull out, like you have that where like someone who is the top dog will be like, no, never mind, I don't want to do that fight and back out of it, and not care because once they get to a fight, as long as they win, they get to carry it another few years and live off that. I do think it's interesting. Like UFC, I feel like is picked up so much more steam than boxing did because it presents this like, oh, they constantly fight. It's constantly on the line. They constantly fight, all of that. And there's no way for this kind of sketchy, like, well, why is he fighting him? I want to see, them. Who's the best? Who's really the best? In somewhat older sports, right? Like college football has changed and even, college basketball has changed more towards like, we need one champion, one clear champion that everybody can get behind. And there's no real controversy because it's like they won enough games in a row. That's all that matters. Became the focus. So I do, again, I think like boxing, it can play to that. It's interesting that we have no talk of someone taking a dive, which is the other big controversy. Like it's never, the only other piece that you could throw in this movie is that they come to him and the promoter behind Creed's back is like, hey, don't try. Like, look, we'll pay you a little bit extra, make it look good, but that's it. And that never comes up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also thought, maybe they could do something with his like mob ties because he gets like $500 from the dude he knows.
Right. Yeah.
But then that dude's just genuinely nice and is like, don't worry about it. Like, hey, here's $500. Like use that for your training, buy your raw eggs, whatever you need.
It's $50. Have a nice time with your girlfriend.
Yeah. And I was like, this guy's a really sweet mobster. Like I already forgot that he was having him break people's hands and he's gonna, he goes, Del Rio owes me $2,000 and they can bring it back in 3 weeks or something. Like, yeah, I totally forgot about that because that guy's so nice. I thought he would come back and do something skeezy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting, right, that there ends up not really being anything on the line stakes wise other than the core character piece of like we want Rocky to be something.
Dignity and respect.
Yeah, we want him to be something, but there's no like he isn't going to get the relationship or he's going to be out poor or like there really isn't, which the later movies are all crazy stakes in the final match. But that there's nothing really necessarily here on the line but his pride.
That is probably the most emotionally connective thing in any Rocky movie that you can get is that sense of self-worth because everything else is Rocky ending communism or Rocky wrestling Hulk Hogan or whatever might happen there.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what makes this movie so good is that like that's all it's about is a man trying to believe that he matters, and like it's not getting caught up in all this extraneous stuff about like, will he win the title or not? Like, who cares? It's just like he needs to prove to himself that he's worthy of whatever he thinks he's worthy of.
Which brings us to talking about when Mickey finally decides to try to come back and become his manager. That scene when for so long Mickey was like, you're a bum, like you haven't done anything with your life, like you're just like weak, can't do it all, like all this other stuff. And then
Mickey locks him out of his own locker at the beginning of the movie.
Gives his locker away.
After he's just won a fight the night before.
Yeah, with Spider Rico. And Mickey like discounts that too. He's like, you want it, doesn't matter. Spider Rico's a bum too. And he just cuts Rocky down at every turn. But the moment he finds out Rocky's going to the championship, like he's going to fight for that championship title, Mickey changes his tune because of his failures. Because Mickey feels like he never made it and he wants to help Rocky. And that creates such an interesting friction between them where now Rocky is like, oh, well, you didn't want to help me before. I don't give a shit about you right now. But that's kind of against Rocky's internal character. He's usually pretty optimistic and wants to believe that there's good in the other people he's talking to. And so that entire sequence where Mickey confronts him and is trying to make a conversation. First of all, I laughed when Mickey walked into his apartment and said, "That's a nice place you got here, Rock." And like, I was like, no, it's a knife in the wall. And like he just turns around and is like, anyways, and starts trying to tout out his pedigree and really connect with Rocky on the level of boxing. But Rocky's so suspicious of it. That whole dynamic of them dancing. I know in our episode when we talked about the whale, we talked about business and blocking. And in this, I feel like the business and the blocking is fantastic. Like it's spectacular in this apartment sequence as Mickey is trying to produce a photo and show Rocky, and Rocky doesn't want to see it and he walks away from it. There is this air you can sense between them that's pushing them around that room, and none of it feels fake. It really feels like that discomfort of not wanting to confront each other about their misgivings with each other. So instead, Rocky just locks himself in the bathroom and starts flushing the toilet a bunch, I guess. Yeah. and Mickey sort of gives up in this quiet desperation. It's really sad when Burgess Meredith is like, Rock, I'm like 70 something years old, and he's just tired and turns and just leaves. It broke my heart. I was like, oh man.
And the way they play that scene where he opens the door and realizes he's forgotten his hat and closes it. And so Rocky thinks that he's left, and Rocky opens the bathroom door and sees Mick standing there putting his hat on, and he just goes right back in the bathroom. Like, fuck this. I don't want to see you. I don't want to do this anymore. Just the impact of that works really well. And then straight from there, like Mickey gets it, he leaves, and then Rocky just starts shouting at him as he's leaving the building, kind of airing all of his grievances, like, I needed you 10 years ago. What, you don't like my place? You think it stinks? Yeah, it fucking stinks.
10 years to come to my house. Huh? What's the matter? You don't like my house? My house stink? That's right, it stinks! Like your prime. What about my prime, Mick? At least you had a prime! I ain't had no prime, I ain't had nothing. Legs are going, everything is going, no one's getting enough nothing. Guy comes up, offers me a fight. Big deal, wanna fight the fight? Yeah, I'll fight the big fight. I wanna get that! And you want to be ringside and see it? Do you? You want to help me out?
And, then finally, kind of as he's yelling, like realizes like, oh, I guess like I have to take this guy up on his offer. Who else is going to coach me? Like if I'm going to like not die, then like I need to take that up, and, runs after him down the street. But it's a really great way to kind of, build that relationship for this movie and future movies with Rocky and Mick. And they both have so many regrets in their life on how they haven't handled things the way they wish they had, and they are each other's ticket to redemption for those sins of their past.
Yeah, I also like that when Rocky runs to meet up with Mickey, we don't hear any ADR. There's some ADR in this movie that comes out of nowhere. It's kind of weird. Like I think Rocky punches like a slaughtered cow and goes moo, and it's like clearly ADR for some reason. He wanted to include that. But here we just see him run into the street and the score takes over, and they walk down the lane and are talking with each other. And we just don't hear any of it. We don't need to. And it's a beautiful crescendo to that sequence. I just, it left me kind of speechless and a little teary eyed.
That also kind of reminds me of On the Waterfront, where there's that big emotional scene where you just hear like foghorns and you don't hear the words that are actually being said.
Yeah.
Because you can imagine once they get down the road and start talking, there's probably a very sweet, intimate moment there. But like you can achieve that through distance more than you can through closeness, and having the music hit at the right cues. And the score is just so fucking good, and it just does. It hits every emotional beat that it needs to hit throughout the movie in just kind of the perfect way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was gonna say, let's talk about the directing real quick, because yeah, in my mind, I always remember this being directed by Stallone, but it's
Right.
not.
Same.
Yeah, so it's directed by John Avildsen. I'm totally probably not
That's
saying
it.
his
And
name
he won
correctly.
Best
Yeah.
Director for this movie,
And
and
he
then
did
never
win.
directed any Rocky movie
No,
again.
Yeah, he directed Rocky 5,
Oh, he
Oh,
did.
oops.
Oh,
which is
shit.
not saying anything good. Not quite sure why he came back for that.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
Ew,
Yeah,
why
he
did
didn't-
Soderbergh
but-
come back for Magic Mike 3, Ryan?
Yeah, why? Who knows? Yeah, the money's in it, I guess, right at that point. He did go on to direct The Karate Kid.
Oh, that makes sense.
So that's interesting that I'm like, okay, he really established then the montage using a hit song around that montage and kind of how a sports movie, like I'm like, in my mind, those two are like the really obvious cliched sports movies. I guess he watched or knew karate a little bit more than boxing, because
Yeah.
the actual karate scenes in that one makes sense, where the boxing here is
Well, yeah,
quite
Stallone didn't
nonsense.
choreograph the karate scenes in Karate Kid, so
yeah, okay, right. But there are a lot of really impactful scenes, and like the big one around the montage and then eventually running up the steps with the steady cam, that
Mhm.
being the new technology that gets used there, makes all of that, right? The music, the fact that I will say they're just running down the street, like this is not with the extra, there aren't extras, they're just people in the background as
Uh-huh.
he's running. And then the use of the steady cam, it just creates this amazing like moment that you absolutely feel. And so many of them, like even I would say, as stupid as the boxing is, the actual things that are happening, like how they're on the ground, like getting up, the tension of all of it, the excitement of the crowd, them going through, like that stuff's all good. It just doesn't make sense on
Yeah.
a boxing point, but it is well directed to get you invested.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's interesting talking about the cinematography. Garrett Brown, the Steadicam inventor, I believe this is the first movie that he
Yeah.
actually used the Steadicam in, and he did some test footage with his wife on the steps of that museum in Philadelphia. And then like Avildsen saw it, and he's like, "No, I want you to do that exact thing in Rocky." And like, there's a lot more scenes than that where it's used, and you don't like watching it now. You don't really think it's anything revolutionary, but like at the time, to have a moving camera, you had to have either a shaky handheld or build out really long tracks and have these complex systems there. And like there's the scene where Paulie and Rocky walk into the meat cooler, and there's all these beef carcasses there,
yeah.
and the camera is just one single take moving, I don't know, at least 100 feet probably, and weaving in through all these beef sides. And it's just it's so interesting the way that's done. And the Steadicam is used in a way that it's not, like the way I think of the Steadicam is more like The Shining, where you're just like
Yeah.
amazed by it, and it's kind of drawing attention to the cinematography, which is not a bad thing. But in Rocky, it's almost just kind of servicing the characters, and just like, we need to make the best shot we can to make this scene land emotionally and to make you care about these characters in the right way. And the Steadicam was useful for what they were trying to do given the sets they had. And there's the montage stuff and going up the steps, which is super cool. But then there's just these smaller moments that you don't really think of as being that big a deal now, because we see this stuff more often in modern movies.
It gives you such a feeling that you're there with Rocky, like that it
Yeah.
gives it a very realistic feel, because they're not having to work around. Yeah, can you imagine like building a track all the way up those steps and then having
Oh,
like
geez.
he has
I think
to
you would
stand inside
see
of a
it.
circle, and
There would
you
be no
see it,
way to
right.
do it without just seeing it on camera.
Yeah.
Right, which is the same thing with The Shining, right? There's no way you could have that whole hall
Yeah.
and then follow that all the way around all those curves. And it makes you feel more in the movie, in the moments, and with it. And I think that's what works. And you're right, even in these smaller moments, you don't realize it, but your mind is just like, we're there. It makes natural movements and naturally follows.
Yeah, I was thinking about like, Paulie pushing the meat and teasing Rocky the entire way through that meat locker.
Mm-hmm.
If you did that with cuts, it would just make it so much more impersonal in the way that it's done. Like I'm trying to think of how you would do it other than, ones and twos. And it would make that action and that momentum and Paulie's teasing just land like more of a distraction than it was actually part of that sequence of getting to know these characters and their relationship. Because the entire time Rocky's just like, stop doing it. And Paulie's like, like pushing whatever. And it's just, you're allowed to be there with them. And it's so goofy.
Yeah, and that scene is so good. Like, it builds up a lot of the dynamic between Rocky and Paulie. And, they're going through this whole thing. He keeps asking Rocky for a job. He's like, my hands are like having all these problems. He's like, Rocky's like, oh, maybe you should work out. So it's like, no, I need a new job. Like, I can't keep doing this over and over. And, this conversation just builds really naturally into this very casual conversation where he's cutting a steak up for Rocky, and he's like, so you balling, my sister?
Yeah.
And it just like really explodes at that point. Rocky is very offended, and he clearly wants to punch Paulie, but instead just punches one of the beef carcasses and just like goes to town on that fucking thing and breaks the ribs, and like leads to, kind of that famous sequence where he's training in the freezer and the local news crew is coming and profiling him on TV.
Yeah.
That's
love
the
that
worst
sequence,
idea of training.
too.
All of
Yeah,
this training in
horrible
here.
idea.
That's such a bad idea.
It's such a gimmick. He's just got bloody knuckles. That's like
I love all the
coolest
blood on
thing.
his hands. He turns to the news anchor and he's just got blood pouring all down his arms.
I love that the news anchor interrupted the feed and was like, hey, the meat guy, he's in the background shot. Get out of the way. Like, trying to push Paulie aside. Another tragic thing where Paulie wanted to be recognized and he wasn't.
Today we're here with heavyweight challenger Rocky Balboa. The reason we're standing in this
Hey, the meat guy's sticking his face in.
Let's try it again, Rocky.
It's like, oh man.
Talking about the boxing, we've talked about how this is not, the best choreographed boxing fights. I think it's interesting that like Rocky is clearly not a good boxer, right? And I think that fits with the story because he's always been self-taught, right? Like he's never been able to get Mick to help him out and give him proper coaching. And so he's basically just survived on instinct and fighting a lot of people that maybe aren't that good. And he's got a lot of losses in his career. And, you have the training montage, which is fucking great. And, he clearly gets bigger and stronger according to, the lyrics of the montage song. It's funny to me how blatant that montage song is. Like
Felt
the
like
music
a parody song.
Yeah, it feels like is this from Team America or something. But it just works. It's so good. It just works. But he's clearly getting in better shape for the fight. But it does not appear that Mick has really taught him much at all about boxing when he gets into the ring. And like, he's a guy that's had 70 professional fights and has learned a lot of bad habits. I'm sure it's hard to get rid of those things.
Can't
and,
keep his fucking hands up. Even
Yeah.
in the early,
apparently
the
at
early
all.
rounds.
He's just really good at getting hit in the face.
That's like Rocky IV. He still hasn't learned anything. Like
No.
even Drago punches his face the entire round for boxing. It's
He just leads with his head and just keeps taking punches to the face over and over. And he's just a superhuman in that he can't be knocked out. Like he just gets back up every time and he can take more of a beating than any human that has ever lived.
My God, he can withstand super CTE. We need to study him for science.
Isn't that the way Homer? Isn't that his strategy?
Yeah, that's his strategy. Yes.
I swear about.
That's funny.
Yeah, I think I first seen this a long time ago, and then since then I actually had watched boxing. Like I do like watching boxing, and coming back and watching it again, like immediately I was like, that fight would stop. Like almost right away, I'm like, that ref would stop that fight. He hasn't defended
you're
himself.
not trying
He
to
hasn't
defend
thrown a
yourself.
punch.
Put your fucking hands up. What are you doing?
Yeah.
That ref just wanted to see him go the distance, Ryan.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah,
did you
and
guys notice before the fight, both Apollo and Rocky do this weird nasal spray?
Yeah.
And like sniff really hard as they're pulling this nasal spray. It's like, what the fuck is that?
Is that a saline to like make sure that they don't bloody up and
Yeah,
you know,
it's
Or like
either a
open up their
saline-
nasal passageways so they can breathe
Yeah.
well during the fight or something? I don't know.
I don't know about in 76 what was legal and not legal, but sometimes you can use things that purposely open up your nasal passage. Now things are illegal that will do that to a certain extent. They still
Yeah.
use it on horses and horse racing, but the same thing, it opens up your passages and gets you more
oxygen.
air going.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I would even say, like, from a directing standpoint, I haven't seen the Creed movies. I think probably because I thought Rocky 5 was so bad.
It's really bad.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying Rocky 4 is great. No,
Rocky's like 60 and decides to fight the heavyweight champion of the world again.
Yeah, that's what I kind of am like. I thought Creed was just like, all right, we're just fucking trying to continue to cash in on this. But now recently I'm like, all right, I saw the Creed 3 trailer and I'm like, all right, maybe there's something going on with these movies that's different. But from a boxing standpoint, as a directing, I'm sure these recent movies are so much better at this, but we never really get he's southpaw, and that's mentioned, which he explains poorly. But we don't really get it.
He's southpaw.
Yeah.
I just love how Adrian does not talk during that whole date sequence, and Stallone cannot shut up. And every time he sees her in the pet shop or on the date, whatever, he just keeps talking, and he can't shut the fuck up. And it's like, you're gonna sabotage yourself, dude. Like, just be quiet. Let her talk. Like, what are you? And like, he's waiting for her to talk, and she's shy and she doesn't want to. But just hearing him go on and repeat himself and say dumb things is just funny to me.
Yeah, never ask the question. Just keeps going with his own shit. But yeah, like that. If we had an understanding of like, oh, a southpaw has this advantage, right? That or talk about their arm length, their height, or something like there never really was anything that we got an idea of like what makes Rocky different that
He's
he
like,
can
it throws
go
off your timing.
sort of other than like he has grit, which you're right is totally like an anime thing. That's all the explanation we need. An anime thing is just like, oh, he has more heart. That's what matters. which is what I think this rides on. And then from a standpoint, like it's never really clear the length of the rounds or which round we're in.
We jump from like round 1 to like 13 pretty fast.
Yeah, they just keep flashing like the boxing girls with the round cards, and it's like there's a part during the fight where they're just like boxing girl 3, boxing girl 4, boxing girl 5. They just keep going. You don't even see anything happening in those rounds,
right? And we have no idea like is who's winning the rounds, like who's ahead, who's behind,
right?
Like,
yeah, but it doesn't matter.
So
it
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah, but it is interesting how like all of that is just like not there at all from a boxing, like this being a quote sports movie. The sports part is really kind of glossed over really quickly at the end to kind of get to the like all that matters is he went longer than people would think, and he's got grit and heart. That's it.
Yeah.
And there's in some of the later movies they talk about, Rocky's smaller and shorter than a lot of his opponents, so he needs to like get inside and work the body, and they talk a little bit about strategy against longer opponents, but that's about it, really. That's all you really get. In Rocky, there's just none of that whatsoever.
They foreshadow things that happen in the ring, and that's about it. Like he talks about his nose not being broken. A lot of people talk about his nose not being broken. Paulie talks about you breaking the ribs, and he talks about breaking the ribs, and then it just ends up being, hey, he breaks Apollo's ribs, Apollo breaks his nose. There we go.
Yep.
That's what we got, the payoff.
And of course, imagine if this really was like an anime where it's like he gets like hit in the nose and like nothing happens, and the crowd goes, and then over on the side, where he's explaining to Paulie like his nose is unbreakable.
Oh yeah, like the guys in the corner.
Never seen that before. Yeah, just explaining it.
Yeah, and we get the famous "you gotta cut me, Mick" scene, which I don't know why, but I've heard that so much in pop culture, and only recently has it like faded away for me. I don't hear it anymore. But I was just like, oh, I forgot. This is where this happens. He gets his eye cut open, and it looks pretty fake, but it's also just like, ugh, the whole time I think about it.
Yeah.
I'm like, man.
I can't see nothing. Gotta open my eye. Cut me, Mick.
I don't want to do it.
Go on, cut me. Cut me.
Try it. Cut it.
That's brutal shit.
Yeah, boxing is fucking barbaric.
Yeah, the sweet science. that's a branding thing.
Yeah, they also bleed to a point that maybe would have caused a stoppage.
Yeah. Rocky's face is never going to heal, right? Like, that's never going to be the same.
No. He'll never see again.
Yes.
Rocky 2, there's an entire plot point about how he's gone blind in his right eye from the fight against Apollo, and Apollo wants a rematch. And so he has to train to fight regular instead of southpaw so he can actually see what's happening in front of him.
Side.
And then in the later movies, they never bring it up again.
Yeah, it's fine. He recovered his vision.
Yes.
Is Adrian in any of the other ones?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Adrian's a central figure.
I
in the
forgot
movies.
if
they kill her off down the line at some point. But
she's not in Rocky 4, right? Where is she?
I'm pretty sure she is. I watched 2 and 3 this past week, and she's in both of those. I assume she's in 4. I'm pretty sure they kill her off in 4 or 5. I don't know which one. But.
Okay. Probably 5, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah. Well, let's talk about the ending of the movie then. That whole culmination. We get that boxing match and everything, but to the point we were talking about earlier, the director having this good sense of momentum, maybe not necessarily real world rules for boxing, but they are able to, there's this achievement of carrying you through the fight, that montage sequence of the ring girls counting up. And then this final moment where Rocky's getting the shit beat out of him in that final round and gets knocked down. And Mickey is like, stay down, Rock. And he's just like, fuck it, I'm going for it. I'm going all in. And he's getting up. And at that moment, you're like cheering.
I love the look on Apollo's face when Stallone gets up. He's like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I've given this guy everything I can, and he's still standing.
Love the shambling that they do. And the moment that they like ring the bell after he's just like beating on Apollo's ribs, and they just start clinching. And Apollo's like, ain't gonna be no rematch. And Rocky's like, don't want one. And then immediately the like reporters fled the stage.
The music hits
the
real
music
hard.
hits hard, and it's just this emotional high. And this reporter is like, Rocky, how do you feel about it? He's like, Adrian! Just like fucking yelling. And Adrian's like, Rocky, like we're just running to the ring. Which those sequences when they cut away from the fight to show Adrian were heart-wrenching for me because it was like the wrestler. It felt like the wrestler.
Yeah.
I was like, oh God, she's going to watch this man die in the ring.
Yeah.
And she just got confidence from him in their relationship. Shit, this is fucking rough. But then like hugging, embracing, and that freeze frame, that's all I needed. I don't need to see anything else from this movie. Run those credits, man.
The ending is like 7 exclamation points. Just like it's so good. And it's like it all comes together in kind of a cheesy way, but like I don't fucking care. It's so good. It just works super well. I love that they announced that Apollo's the winner and you like barely hear it. And you see him kind of in the background of one of the scenes putting his fist up. But like we don't care about that. We're back on Rocky, and Adrian runs up to him and they, confess their love to each other. And, the movie ends in this emotional crescendo and the music just hitting you right in the heart. And yeah,
honestly, I think that's like the closest I'm going to get to watching a movie and feeling like I just did a line of cocaine at the end of it.
Yeah.
So I was just like, oh man, I'm going to go start a business.
You want to like run laps after you see the movie.
Yeah, exactly. Which I mean, we talked about seeing after this, like all the Rocky movies become a caricature, and then pop culture sort of enveloping it, and a lot of people forgetting what this original movie is, it becoming a dorm room poster. I just wanted to bring up this anecdotal piece that in college at UT, when I was walking through campus to get to different classes, there was one student, I will never know who this brave hero is, but they dressed in sweats every day of the year. Doesn't matter if it was summer or winter. And they ran with a boombox that just played the Rocky montage music the entire time.
Getting stronger.
To any class. And they had shades on and everything, like a whole Stallone look. And I was just like, this is the most beautiful epitome of what Rocky culture is for me.
Was he like running and fist pumping in
yes,
the air?
He was.
Yeah.
He was. It was great. I love that
So
person.
good.
Wherever they are, they inspired me.
Yeah, amazing.
But yeah.
I think I want to briefly touch on the awards for this movie. It was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, won 3 of them for Best Picture, Director, and Editing, I assume for the montage sequence. They got 4 acting nominations, didn't win any of them. Wasn't nominated for score, which kind of shocked me. It was nominated for Best Song for the montage song, but not overall for score. When it won Best Picture, that year was really competitive. It beat out All the President's Men, Network, and Taxi Driver.
Wow.
Were all nominated, and Rocky came out ahead. In my opinion, Taxi Driver should have won that, but like I don't have a problem with Rocky winning Best Picture. It's a great movie, and there's been so many terrible movies that have won Best Picture over the years that you understand why this one. It's a movie that the Academy can kind of get behind because it's inspirational and all of that. It's not like a weird downer like Taxi Driver is, but
yeah.
That's all I got. You guys have any other thoughts on Rocky before we close this out?
I would say I think it honestly holds up pretty well. There's a little bit of like of its time, but it's really just around that romance angle. I think everything else honestly still works. It is simplistic, but it's good enough. Like it's just enough that kind of anyone can follow along and get it. We don't get into the particulars of the sport at all and have to worry about that. While the boxing is questionable, it isn't unrealistic. Other than the fact that how long is it between the announced fight and him getting
5
in the
weeks.
match? Because 5 weeks, not enough time to
Yeah.
train to actually go against someone at Creed's level.
That's just an excuse, Ryan. That's what all those other boxers used as an excuse to
Yeah.
get out of it.
I mean, he was boxing, so he's in some shape, I guess, but that's a little bit of a stretch. Yeah, even like for my kids, like it was clear, like they don't know what's going on, with what the hell it is other than punching people, but that's all you
Yeah.
need to know. And yeah, I think it really is a movie it's all of its elements. The characters are believable. The fact that who they cast, but Stallone is the part. I mean, he is Rocky. There's no way to depart it, but that's because he makes Rocky grounded. Like he is a regular guy, and Stallone plays it, as a regular guy, and it works. And you have that feeling of like, yeah, hey Rocky, yeah, I could know that guy. He's cool, yeah. And so I think that, and the music, and the directing, and cinematography, like it all comes together perfectly. And so that's where it's just like it is a whole piece movie that I think works.
Yeah, for sure. Only other thing I'll add is that whenever I see Carl Weathers in anything, all I can think of is, baby, you got a stew going.
Yeah.
Yeah, my thought is always, you're married to Carl Weathers?
Oh, baby, you got to take that home. You got to put that in a pot, get some veggies. Baby, you got a stew going.
I fucking love Carl Weathers.
Oh, he's wonderful. Just so great. That and Dylan, you
son
son of a bitch.
Yes, obviously. If you haven't seen Action Jackson, I recommend it.
Oh, I haven't
It's
seen
a
Action
fucking
Jackson.
wild,
Oh, yeah.
it's a fucking wild Carl Weathers vehicle. But yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so I think that kind of wraps everything up. Ryan, would you recommend this movie?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and I would recommend this movie as well. There's a reason there's a statue of Sylvester Stallone. I'm sorry, there's a statue of Rocky, the character, in Philadelphia.
I can't believe that's real.
can't do-
That's
Yeah.
wild.
Did
to
they
me.
build a statue of RoboCop in Detroit, or did they build that statue in Dallas? I'm not entirely sure where that one is.
I did not know there was a RoboCop statue.
I'm pretty sure there is.
Oh my. Yeah, and I don't even know how that statue came to be. Like they write it into Rocky 3, but I don't know if they made it for Rocky 3 and it's just there now, or if like the city just loved Rocky and made it and then they had to write it into the movie, because how could you not? It's there on the steps.
Yeah. Do you think I was gonna say, do you think New York would have a statue of Travis Bickle? But that's
God.
like way too much.
Oh no, that's not right.
Anyways, yeah, Dixon, would you recommend Rocky, Dixon?
I would absolutely recommend Rocky. The sequels are hit and miss. There's some that are good. There's some that are very much not. But the first Rocky really holds up. And I feel like we would be, kind of in a better cinematic universe if the Rocky sequels didn't exist. It was just kind of one self-contained thing, because it is so good. And it's this gritty character drama that it's not doing what the other movies do. And it's not kind of becoming this weird, sports movie paint by numbers thing that it's become now. So, yeah, the first one is great. Don't look down on it because of, kind of what the sequels have become and the influence it has had on our shitty sports movies of today.
Yeah, awesome.
Cool. Well, thanks for hanging out with us this week on the Afterthoughts podcast. With me, as always,
John Garcia.
Ryan King doesn't know it's a damn show. He thinks it's a damn podcast.
Block your face. Block your face, Rocky.
Adrian! Rocky!
Hey, where's your hat?
I love you!
I love you. I love you.
I love you! I love you!
Hey there, movie buffs, TV toughs, and all listeners in between. John here from the Afterthoughts podcast. I just wanted to drop in at the end of this episode and say thanks for listening. If you've got afterthoughts of your own to share, hit us up. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Afterpod, or jump into a conversation on our Discord server. You can find info for this and more at theafterpod.transistor.fm. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.